Good morning. If we could all get you to pay attention up here now, and we're going to get this ceremony started, but it'll be better if we can do it without all the noise.
Please remain standing as we honor our nation with the presentation of the colors and the singing of our national anthem, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. The color guard will be presented by the Camdenton Army Junior ROTC Laker Battalion. The color guard includes Cadet Captain Lucinda Baker, Cadet Captain Abigail Pittman, and Cadet Sergeant Benjamin Matusik. And the color guard is commanded by Cadet Command Sergeant Major John Holt. The national anthem will be sung by the high school concert choir. Thank you. Please be seated. Good morning. I'm Cadet Lieutenant Colonel Seth Burmeister, Commander of the Camdenton Army Junior ROTC Laker Battalion. I'd like to thank all of you on behalf of the district and our battalion for attending today's ceremony, held in honor of our nation's veterans. Our veterans are an incredibly important part of maintaining the safety and security of the nation. They are the reason so many American citizens hold our nation to such high esteem and pride, and the reason we enjoy the freedom we have in America to live our best life. Throughout our nation's history, over 41 million soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen have courageously answered the call to defend our freedom, to aid our friends and allies, and to drive back aggressors, to protect our future, regardless of the risk to their own lives. We will never be able to fully express our gratitude to the more than 650,000 American service members who gave their life in defense of our nation. We can, however, recognize and thank the 500,000 veterans who live with us in Missouri, our home. To the families of those who we lost, we honor your loved ones not for their death. We honor their lives. We honor what they stood for, what they believed, and their service to our nation. We live our lives in memory of them. They gave up their future for ours, and we will never be able to repay that debt. So instead, we live our lives to the fullest in honor of the one that they gave up. As Admiral Chester W. Nimitz wrote in his address to the fleet on September 2nd, 1945, to them, we have a solemn obligation. The obligation to ensure that their sacrifice will help to make this a better and safer world in which to live. Let us have a moment of silence. When Francis Scott Key wrote the Star-Spangled Banner, describing the United States as the land of the free and the home of the brave, he likely had no idea how long this verse would ring true. He had no idea, like many of our veterans in attendance here today, how much impact his actions and words would have on history. Today, it is our solemn privilege to say thank you to all of America's veterans, to let them know that we honor and appreciate their service. We gather here at the core of our community to demonstrate our gratefulness that they have allowed this nation to remain the land of the free and the home of the brave. At this time, it is my honor to introduce the Camdenton Middle School Choir singing My America. Thank you. Veterans Day has been celebrated annually on November 11th by our school district for many years. Because of this, members of the community share an understanding of the importance of this day and the individuals it is named for. Despite this, the true history of the day is not widely known. Cadet Captain Hayden Patrick from the JRTC battalion staff has put together a video presentation detailing the history of Veterans Day.
In 1921, an unknown World War I American soldier was buried in Arlington National Cemetery. This site, on a hillside overlooking the Potomac River and the city of Washington, D.C., became the focal point of reverence for American veterans. Similar ceremonies occurred earlier in England and France, where an unknown soldier was buried in each nation's highest place of honor. In England, Westminster Abbey; in France, the Arc de Triomphe. These memorial gestures all took place on November 11th, giving universal recognition to the celebrated ending of World War I fighting at 11 a.m., November 11th, 1918, the 11th hour of the 11th day on the 11th month. The day became known as Armistice Day. Armistice Day officially received its name in America in 1926 through a congressional resolution. It became a national holiday 12 years later by similar congressional action. If the idealistic hope had been realized that World War I was the war to end all wars, November 11th might still be called Armistice Day, but only a few years later, after the holiday was proclaimed, war broke out in Europe. 16.5 million Americans took part. 407,000 of them died in service, or the 292,000 in battle. Armistice Day changed to honor all veterans. The first celebration using the term Veterans Day occurred in Birmingham, Alabama in 1947. Raymond Weeks, a World War II veteran, organized a National Veterans Day, which included a parade and other festivities to honor all veterans. The event was held on November 11th, then designated Armistice Day. Later, U.S. Representative Edward Reese of Kansas proposed a bill that would change Armistice Day to Veterans Day. In 1954, Congress passed a bill that President Eisenhower signed proclaiming November 11th as Veterans Day. Raymond Weeks received the Presidential Citizens Medal from President Reagan in November 1982. Weeks' local parade and ceremonies are now an annual event celebrated nationwide. On Memorial Day, 1958, 2 more unidentified American war dead were brought from overseas and interred in the plaza beside the unknown soldier of World War I. One was killed in World War II, the other in the Korean War. In 1984, an unknown serviceman from the Vietnam War was placed alongside the others. The remains from Vietnam were exhumed May 14, 1998, identified as Air Force First Lieutenant Michael Joseph Blasey, and removed for burial. To honor these men, symbolic of all Americans who gave their lives in all wars, an Army Honor Guard, the 3rd U.S. Infantry, the Old Guard, keeps day and night vigil. A law passed in 1968 changed the national commemoration of Veterans Day to the 4th Monday in October. It soon became apparent, however, that November 11th was a date of historic significance to many Americans. Therefore, in 1978, Congress returned the observance to its traditional date. National ceremonies held at Arlington National Cemetery, the focal point for official national ceremonies for Veterans Day, continues to be the memorial amphitheater built around the Tomb of the Unknown. At 11 a.m. on November 11th, a combined color guard representing all military services executes present arms at the tomb. The nation's tribute to its war dead is symbolized by the laying of a presidential wreath. The bugler plays taps. The rest of the ceremony takes place in the amphitheater. Veterans Day ceremonies at Arlington and elsewhere are coordinated by the President's Veterans Day National Committee. Chaired by the Secretary of Veteran Affairs, the committee represents national veterans organizations. Governors of many states and U.S. territories appoint Veterans Day chairpersons who, in cooperation with the National Committee and Department of the Defense, arrange and promote local ceremonies. According to the Department of Veteran Affairs, the term veteran means a person who served in the active military, naval, or air service, and who was discharged or released therefrom under conditions other than dishonorable. There are around 19 million U.S. veterans as of this year, according to the data from the Department of Veteran Affairs, representing less than 10% of the total U.S. adult population.
Though every year we recognize and respect every soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, and Coast Guardsman who has dedicated some or all of their life to the service of our nation, as part of this ceremony, we also profile a select subset of our veterans. We do this in order to highlight and further educate our community on the service and many sacrifices of our veterans throughout American history. This year, we have chosen to highlight notable individuals who have served our nation, be it a century ago or a year ago, to show the persistence of honor through the ages. At this time, Cadet Command Sergeant Major John Holt and Cadet Major Jabari Stinson will profile a few American heroes dating back to the First World War.
The First World War affected the world in a manner that dwarfs the impact of conflicts that came before it. Across the world, over 60 million soldiers would fight in the war to end all wars. Over 9 million of those soldiers never returned home. The First World War changed the entire political climate of the world and shaped history as we know it. Over 4 million United States citizens answered the call to defend not only the interests of our nation, but in a greater sense, they would defend the liberty and safety of peoples across the globe. Frank Woodruff Buckles was a corporal in the United States Army and the last surviving American military veteran of World War I. Frank Buckles was born in Bethany, Missouri. Buckles came from a long lineage of soldiers that included soldiers of the Revolutionary and Civil Wars. He enlisted in the Army in 1917 at the age of 16 after being denied enlistment by the Marine Corps and the Navy. He was advised by his sergeant that the fastest way to the front lines would be to seek a position driving an ambulance. Buckles went through basic training at Fort Riley, Kansas. Later that year, he embarked for Europe aboard the RMS Carpathia, famous for rescuing survivors of the Titanic. During the war, Buckles drove ambulances and motorcycles for the Army's first Fort Riley Casualty Detachment, first in England and then in France. Frank later recalled his service as a doughboy. There was never a shortage of blown-up bodies that needed to be rushed to the nearest medical care. The British and French troops were in bad shape. Even guys about my age were old and tired. After 3 years of living and dying inside a trench, you knew that the Brits and French were happy to see us doughboys. Every last one of us Yanks thought that we would wrap this war up in a month or two and head back home before harvest. In other words, we were the typical cocky Americans no one wants around until they need help winning a war. Following his service in World War I, Buckles attended a business school in Oklahoma City and found work at a shipping company in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. In 1922 to 1923, he served with the 7th Regiment of the New York National Guard in New York City, where he also worked in financial services. In 1940, Buckles had been employed by White Star, American President, and W.R. Grace shipping companies. And in that year, shipping business took him to Manila in the Philippines. After the outbreak of the Pacific War and the invasion of the Philippines, he reportedly remained in Manila to help resupply U.S. troops. He was captured in January of 1942 by Japanese forces and spent the next 3 years and 2 months as a civilian internee in the Centeno Tomas and Los Baños prison camps. As a prisoner, he battled starvation, receiving only a small meal of mush served in a tin cup, a utensil he kept for the rest of his life. With a weight below 100 pounds, Buckles developed beriberi and led fellow captives in calisthenics to help counter the effect of their imprisonment. Their captors showed little mercy, but Buckles was allowed to grow a small garden, which he used to help feed the children who were imprisoned there. All of these captives were freed following a raid by Allied forces on February 23, 1945. Before the war, he had become fluent in German, Spanish, and Portuguese, as well as French, and by the end of the war, he had also learned some Japanese. After World War II, Buckles moved to San Francisco and married Audrey Mayo in 1946. 8 years later, the couple bought the 330-acre Gapview Farm in West Virginia, where they raised cattle. Ancestors named Buckles had settled near Gapview centuries earlier. In 1955, their only child, Susanna, was born. By then, the world traveler had settled down to a life of farm activities, social gatherings, and serving as an officer and eventually president of the County Historical Society. The Second World War was as devastating as the first, with over 200,000 servicemen sacrificing their lives for the defense of freedom throughout the conflict. One surviving veteran from our community, Ray Hall, served as an aircraft crew chief in England during the German bombardment. He joined the Army Air Corps in May of 1942. During the war, he spent many nights hunkered for cover in air raid shelters. The busiest day Ray could remember was D-Day. During the assault on Normandy, Ray's pilot would make 8 separate flights. After the service, Ray went to work at the Strat Hughes Tool Company. He would later purchase the Four Corners Trucking Company, which he would rename to Transcontinental Western Trucking Company. He would work in trucking, servicing the oil fields until the oil crash of 1989. He then retired to the Lake of the Ozarks in 1990 with his wife, Judy Hall, who he's been married to for over 40 years. Ray recently celebrated his 100th birthday, and we have the pleasure of having him in our company today. Please join me in a round of applause to celebrate Mr. Ray Hall. Also in attendance at today's ceremony is World War II Army veteran J. Howard Kirkstetter Jr. Please join me in recognizing Mr. Kirkstetter. The Korean War, which began as a police action and escalated to a conflict, is sometimes referred to as the Forgotten War, due to the lack of attention it receives when compared to other wars like World War I, World War II, and Vietnam. Its impact on the soldiers that served in it, however, are to never be forgotten. December 8, 1941, enlistee Norman Adams chose the United States Air Force with dreams of becoming a pilot. Though he failed to complete pilot school, he did get to train on the New Norden bomb site as a bombardier. Though flying missions over Italy, he was confident flak would never catch up to his plane. In the bombing range over Ploiești, Romania's oil fields, however, Adams' luck ran out when his plane lost 2 engines. He survived a horrific crash landing that took the life of several of his crew members. Adams' luck returned, however, when he was released after 14 months of captivity, and he was able to return home for Christmas in 1944. At the end of the war, he decided to re-enlist, flying Cold War missions for Strategic Air Command, and remained in the Air Force until 1967.
In contrast to the Korean War, the Vietnam War depleted our nation of resources, men, and morale. It took a heavy toll on the nation and those who fought for it. Medal of Honor recipient Nick Bacon enlisted in the Army at 17, bored and encouraged by his relatives. He completed basic training and advanced individual training at Fort Ord, California, shortly before being deployed to Worms, Germany. He spent 2 tours in Vietnam. Within his first week, he was in a helicopter crash where all but 2 soldiers, including himself, were killed. The fear was debilitating, but his mental fortitude and courage helped him overcome that fear in order to ensure the safety and well-being of his soldiers. Bacon volunteered to serve a second combat tour in Vietnam from 1968 to 1969, where he served with Company B, 4th Battalion, 21st Infantry Regiment, 11th Infantry Brigade of the American Division. As Bacon led a unit in Bravo Company's 1st Platoon on August 26, 1968, in an operation to west of Tam Key, Bacon and his squad were fired upon from enemy positions. After Bacon had destroyed these positions, the platoon leader was gravely injured. When 3rd Platoon also lost its leader, Bacon assumed command of that platoon as well, leading both platoons against the other enemy positions. While the wounded were being evacuated, Bacon climbed up a nearby tank and fired onto the enemies without regard for his own safety. "I got my boot heel shot off. I got holes in my canteens. I got my rifle grip shot up," he recounted in the 2003 book, Beyond Glory. To him, the Medal of Honor he was awarded represents those who have sacrificed and will never be recognized. It represents the ones who made it to the supreme sacrifice, to those who lost limbs or mobility, and the family members that will never see their husbands, fathers, and brothers. Many United States servicemen and women fought to defend the rights of the citizens of Kuwait during the First Gulf War, also known as Operation Desert Storm. James Stinson, who is also my father and a member of our community, was born and raised in Cameron, Missouri, eventually enlisting in the Navy September 24th, 1986, at the age of 20. Following his training at General Riggs Recruitment Training Command, Great Lakes, James served on 5 different ships over the course of his career, traveling the world 3 separate times and visiting 66 countries over the course of his service. While stationed on the USS Princeton during Operation Desert Storm, the Ticonderoga-class cruiser hit a bottom contour mine February 18, 1991. He retired from the military in 2006 and returned to his home state of Missouri to continue life with his wife, daughter, and 2 sons. The global war on terror began after the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001. The war rallying the nation together against a common cause was the longest protracted war in our nation's history. Medal of Honor recipient Staff Sergeant David G. Bellavia was born November 10, 1975 in Buffalo, New York. Following his high school graduation in 1994, Bellavia attended 2 highly respected universities before returning to the military. In 2001, Bellavia had to choose between changing his military occupational specialty, submitting a hardship discharge, or remaining as an infantryman and leaving his family for 36 months on an unaccompanied tour to Germany. After the terror attacks on 9/11, Bellavia felt his country needed him and chose to stay and fight. While clearing a house in Fallujah, Iraq, a squad from Staff Sergeant Bellavia's platoon became trapped within a room by intense enemy fire coming from a fortified position. Recognizing the severity and the danger of the situation, and without regard for his own safety, Staff Sergeant Bellavia retrieved an automatic weapon and entered the doorway of the house to fight off the insurgents. Bellavia provided covering fire that allowed the squad to exit the house. An armored vehicle was brought to aid Bellavia. However, due to the high walls surrounding the house, it could not fire directly at the enemy position. Bellavia then re-entered the house and again came under an intense enemy fire. He noticed an enemy insurgent preparing to launch a rocket-propelled grenade at his platoon. Bellavia assaulted the enemy position, killing one insurgent and wounding another who fled into a different area of the house. Bellavia, realizing he had an uncleared, darkened room to his back, moved to clear it. As he entered, an insurgent came down the stairs, firing at him, and the previously wounded insurgent re-emerged and re-engaged Bellavia. As he entered further into the darkened room, he returned fire and killed both insurgents. Bellavia then received enemy fire from another insurgent emerging from a closet inside the darkened room. Exchanging gunfire, Bellavia pursued the enemy up the stairs and killed him. Having reached the second floor, Bellavia moved to the roof. At this point, a 5th insurgent leapt down from the 3rd floor roof onto the 2nd floor roof. Bellavia attacked the insurgent through the window and wounded him, causing him to fall off the roof. Acting purely on instinct to bring the members of his platoon to safety, Bellavia cleared an entire enemy-filled house, ended the lives of 4 insurgents, and badly wounded a 5th. Staff Sergeant Bellavia's bravery, complete disregard for his own safety, and unselfish and courageous actions are in keeping with the finest traditions of military service. He left the Army in August 2005 and co-founded Vets for Freedom, a veteran advocacy organization that sought to separate politics from the warriors who fight in the fields. Their membership consists of tens of thousands of veterans who fought in Iraq and Afghanistan. Bellavia returned to Iraq as an embedded reporter in 2006 and 2008, where he covered heavy fighting in Ramadi, Fallujah, and the Diyala province.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to introduce our guest speaker, Brigadier General Retired John Seward. Brigadier General Retired Seward was sworn into the Army in 1978. He is a 1980 graduate of the ROTC program at the University of Missouri-Columbia with a degree in Recreation and Parks Administration. He was commissioned as an Air Defense Artillery Officer. He holds a Master of Business Administration in Aviation Business from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University and a Master of Science degree in Strategic Studies from the U.S. Army War College. His command experience includes Commander, Bravo Battery, 1st Battalion, 3rd Air Defense Artillery, 101st Airborne Division, Air Assault. Deputy Commander, 69th Air Defense Artillery Brigade, Germany, Operation Southern Watch, Saudi Arabia, and Operation Joint Endeavor, Bosnia, Croatia, former Yugoslavia. Commander, 3rd Battalion, Airborne, 4th Air Defense Artillery, 82nd Airborne Division. Commander, 108th Air Defense Artillery Brigade, 18th Army Corps, Operation Enduring Freedom, Kuwait, and Operation Iraqi Freedom, Iraq and Jordan. Commandant, United States Army Sergeant Major Academy, Fort Bliss, Texas. Commanding General, 94th Army Air and Missile Defense Command, F. Hawaii. Deputy Commanding General, U.S. Army Space and Missile Defense Command, Army Forces Strategic Command, and Deputy Commanding General, United States Army Pacific Chief of Staff, Joint Task Force 519, Operation Tamagotchi, Japan. Additional assignments include Platoon Leader and Battalion S3 Air, 1st Battalion, 16th Infantry, and Executive Officer, Combat Support Company, 4th Battalion, 327th Infantry, both with the 172nd Light Infantry Brigade, Fort Richardson, Alaska. Battalion Maintenance and Assistance Officer, 1st Battalion, 3rd Air Defense Artillery, and Assistant Division Air Defense Officer, 2nd Battalion, 44th Air Defense Artillery, both with the 101st Airborne Division, Air Assault, Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Assistant Professor of Military Science, Marquette University, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Southeast Asia Desk Officer, J6, U.S. Pacific Command, Camp Smith, Hawaii. Battalion Operations Officer, 1st Battalion, 62nd Air Defense Artillery, 25th Infantry Division Light, Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. Inspector General, 82nd Airborne Division, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and Director of Training and Doctrine, U.S. Army Air Defense Artillery Center and School, Fort Bliss, Texas. His military awards and decorations include the Distinguished Service Medal with 1 Oak Leaf Cluster, Legion of Merit with 2 Oak Leaf Clusters, Bronze Star Medal, Defense Meritorious Service Medal, Meritorious Service Medal with 4 Oak Leaf Clusters, Joint Service Commendation Medal, Army Commendation Medal with 3 Oak Leaf Clusters, and the Army Achievement Medal with 1 Oak Leaf Cluster. He has earned the Combat Action Badge, Master Parachutist Badge, Pathfinder Badge, Air Assault Badge, Air Force Space Badge, and Brazilian, Canadian, German, and Venezuelan jump wings. Brigadier General Seward retired from the United States Army in 2011 and resides in Camdenton, Missouri. He is married to the former Lisa Lagerman of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who is an Air Force veteran. Lisa served the community as a volunteer with the Camden County Child Advocacy Center Council. She previously served as a registered nurse volunteer with the Medical Missions for Christ in Camdenton. They have 4 daughters who also serve the nation: Larissa in the Army, Kira as an Army spouse, Shaya as a Navy civilian, and Malaya in the Army. All of their spouses served or currently serve in the military. There are 4 combat veterans in their immediate family. After retirement, Brigadier General Seward served as the Senior Liaison Officer for the U.S. Army Space and Missile Defense Command, Army Forces Strategic Command Forward Detachment, from February 2012 to April 2018. He was responsible for the establishment and maintenance of continuous and close coordination between the U.S. Strategic Command, Army Space and Missile Defense Command, Army Forces Strategic Command, and Joint Functional Component Command Integrated Missile Defense to ensure unity of purpose and effort between the 3 commands. General Seward next served from May 2018 to May 2020 as a highly qualified expert senior mentor for the U.S. Army Mission Command Training Program, Combined Arms Command, Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. General Seward mentored various Army Corps, division, and brigade commanders and staffs during U.S. Army warfighter exercises, providing guidance on the Army warfighting operations and staff processes. He completed his 42 years of service to the U.S. Army in May 2020. He currently volunteers his time to various civic and veteran organizations and serves as a Pee Wee wrestling coach for the Camdenton Wrestling Club. Mr. Seward serves as the post commander and first vice commander of the Zach Wheat American Legion Post in Sunrise Beach, Missouri, and is a member of the VFW Post in Camdenton, Missouri. He is a member of the Greenview, Missouri Elks Lodge 2857 and serves with his wife as the monthly coffee and snack servers at the local church. They also serve on the church security and safety team. Brigadier General Retired Seward serves on the Army Reserve Officer Training Corps Board of Directors for the University of Missouri, Columbia. He and Lisa are members of the Osage Beach Harley Owners Group and are avid motorcycle riders. Mr. Seward hunts regularly with both bow and firearms. Mr. and Mrs. Seward have rescued Great Danes for over 25 years and currently own 5 Great Danes and 2 rescue cats. Mr. Seward is a certified scuba dive master instructor and holds a 4th degree black belt master in Taekwondo. He is also a lifetime musician, playing the trombone at various churches and organizations, and plays the bass guitar with a local bluegrass group. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Brigadier General Retired John Seward.
Good morning. President Ronald Reagan once said, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction." We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same, or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children what it was like in the United States when we were free. Thank you, thanks for coming, and thanks to the Army Junior ROTC program in Camdenton High School for putting together this event. I also want to give a shout out to the JROTC Raider team for winning a national championship. Members of the United States military, all veterans, all volunteers who have sworn to uphold the security of the United States, I thank you and your families for being here, and I thank our veterans. I am proud to join you on this day of honor. On the 11th day in this 11th month at the 11th hour, our nation remembers the moment when the guns of World War I went silent, and we recognize the service and sacrifice of our nation's veterans. From Valley Forge to Vietnam, from the Yalu River to the Pusan Perimeter, from North Africa to Normandy, from Kuwait to Kandahar, from Berlin to Baghdad, our veterans have borne the cost of America's wars, and they have stood watch over America's peace. The American people are grateful to our veterans and all who have fought for our freedom. On this Veterans Day, we give thanks for the 25 million Americans who strengthen our nation with their example of service and sacrifice. Our veterans are drawn from many generations and many backgrounds. Some charged across great battlefields. Some fought on the high seas. Some patrolled the open skies. And all contributed to the character and the greatness of America. Our nation will always be proud of their service. While we pay homage to all American veterans, I particularly want to thank our Vietnam veterans this morning. They served in a war that deeply divided our nation, but America is resilient. We are a country of temperance, compassion, and reason, and with the passage of time, we healed our wounds. I know many of you have visited the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C. During the day there, the black granite absorbs all the sunlight of the day, then radiates the heat during the evening hours. If the evening is cool and crisp, you can see a mist coming off the wall. For me, it's as if the 58,253 names are breathing life into the bodies of every visitor who passes by. And each one feels invigorated knowing that these men and women gave their lives so that all of us can continue to live the American dream. On this Veterans Day, we also honor a new generation of men and women who are defending our freedom. At this moment, more than 1.4 million Americans are on active duty, serving in the cause of freedom and peace around the world. They are our nation's finest citizens. They confront great danger to defend the safety of the American people. They've brought down tyrants. They've liberated 2 nations, and they've helped bring freedom to more than 50 million people. Through their sacrifice, they're making this nation safer and more secure, and they are earning the proud title of veteran. This generation of service members, this 9/11 generation, has borne the burden of our security during 2 hard decades plus of sacrifice. Our servicemen and women make up less than 1% of Americans, but also represent more than 1 million military spouses, 2 million children, and millions more parents and relatives, all who have shared the strains of deployment and sacrifice on behalf of the country we love. Only 27 years old on average, these young men and women have shattered the false myth of their generation's apathy, for they came of age in an era when so many institutions failed to live up to their responsibilities. They chose to serve a cause greater than themselves. They saw their country threatened, and they signed up to confront that threat. They felt some tug, they answered some call, and they said in the model of the airborne, "Let's go." And they've earned their place among the greatest of generations. That is something for us to be proud of. That is the spirit America needs now, a stronger, newer spirit of service and sacrifice. The spirit that says, what can I do to help? What can I do to serve? The spirit that says, when my country is challenged, I will stand up and be counted. There are also so many in this young generation who still feel that tug to serve, but just don't quite know where to turn. So on this Veterans Day, I ask every one of you, recruit our veterans. They're sitting right here. If you're a business owner, hire them. If you're a community leader, a mayor, a pastor, a preacher, call on them to join your efforts. Hire them to work in your schools and in the district. Organize your community to make a sustained difference in the life of a veteran, because that veteran can make an incredible difference in the life of your community. Veterans Day is set aside to remember every man and woman who has taken up arms to defend our country. We honor every soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, Guardian, and Coast Guardsman who gave some of the best years of their lives to the service of the United States and stood ready to give life itself on our behalf. 25 million of military veterans walk among us. On November 11th, our nation thanks them all. All who have served in this cause are liberators in the best traditions of America. Their actions have made our nation safer in a world full of new dangers. Their actions have also upheld the ideals of America's founding, which defines us still. Our nation values freedom, not just for ourselves, but for all. And because Americans are willing to serve and sacrifice for this cause, our nation remains the greatest force for good among all the nations on the earth. America has needed these qualities in every generation, and every generation has stepped forward to provide them. What veterans have given our country is beyond our power to fully repay. Yet today we recognize our debt to their honor. And on this national holiday, our hearts are filled with respect and gratitude for their selfless service and sacrifice to the nation. This Veterans Day, let us commit ourselves to making sure our veterans receive the care and benefits that they have earned, the opportunities they deserve, and above all, let us welcome them home as what they are, an important, essential part of our communities. This day, as we raise our flags and the bugle sounds, we remember that the men and women of America's armed forces serve a great cause. They follow in a great tradition handed down to them by America's veterans. And in public ceremonies and in private prayer, we give thanks for the freedom we enjoy because of their willingness to serve. I thank you for honoring those who serve today and for honoring those who have set such a sterling example, our nation's veterans. May God bless our veterans. May God bless all who wear the uniform. May God bless their families, and may God continue to bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Bel Cantos will now be singing America the Beautiful.
Amen.
2013, an aspiring Navy officer named Ben Morse adapted the So God Made a Farmer speech written by the radio broadcaster Paul Harvey. Curtis Nicholas will now read the speech titled So God Made a Soldier.
And on the 8th day, God looked down on his planned paradise and said, I need a protector for this world I've made. So, God made a soldier. God said, I need someone ready to get up before dawn and clean his rifle, shine his boots, clean his rifle again, and then enter a world of foreign tongues who cuss his very existence, while he smiles and says, how do you do? So, God made a soldier. I need someone with strong shoulders of which to carry the nation whose shoulders carry the world, but gentle enough to place his child on, when and if he comes back alive. Somebody able and willing to call men from different races, places, and walks of life his brothers, while they enter the valley of the shadow of death, and come home to a place where even his own spit on his morals and his beliefs, the very same who could not spit without him. And so, God made a soldier. God said, I need somebody to stand beside a man for 9 years and call him his brother, then carry the man back home on his back, lower the man's body 6 feet into the ground, dry his tears, turn to his comrade's family and say, we're proud of your son. I need someone to clear his goggles with spit when he sweats too much, tie up his wounds with a t-shirt when he bleeds too much, and dry his eyes with whiskey when he weeps too much. Someone who will run when he can't run anymore, stand up for his country when his legs are numb, and fight for liberty, even when liberty is fighting against him. So, God made a soldier. God had to have someone willing to give 110% of himself to a world that only requires 20. Someone who conducts himself the same, whether in uniform, Sunday best, or a John Deere hat. Someone to work all day, all night, all year, and all his life until his beard becomes too gray. So, God made a soldier. God said, I need somebody to do what he has to do so his country can lay down their heads at peace at night, while his enemies sleep only when he does, which is, needless to say, is not very often. So, God made a soldier. It had to be someone who would put down the needs who would put the needs of others above his own. Somebody to swear on a book that his enemies will burn. Someone to sweat, bleed, fight, and kill one day, and to drive to church with his family the next. And then look with eyes broken from seeing too much, as his son says he wants to spend his life doing what his dad does. So, God made a soldier.
Thank you, Curtis, and thank you, Ben Morse. At this time, we would like to recognize each veteran as a member of their respective branch, with the service medley played by the Camdenton Middle School Band. Veterans, as you hear the hymn of the branch you served in, please stand so that we can recognize your service. this time, I would like to introduce the Camdenton R3 District Superintendent, Dr. Sean Kirksey.
Thank you. Wow, we have some amazingly talented students here at Camdenton. Unbelievable. Great performance. Thank you, bands. Thank you, choir. Thank you, junior ROTC, for putting on a great event. Thank you, faculty and staff of the high school and the middle school. Thank you, student body, for being respectful. This has been a long presentation, worthy of the time spent, but you've been sitting there quite a while, and I really appreciate the respectful way you've conducted yourself. So thank you, students. Thank you most of all, veterans. On Veterans Day, I am always reminded of your sacrifice. It's probably one of my favorite days in school, for a chance to get to experience this. I'm also reminded of my grandfather, who was a World War II veteran, served in the European theater. One day on patrol in France, his unit was ambushed by a sniper. My grandfather was the only one in his unit to survive. He laid on the battlefield for 7 hours with injuries, had to lie motionless, silent, didn't know where the sniper was. He endured that behind enemy lines. The battle waged. The horrors of war were all around him. But his Allied comrades surged forward and were able to rescue him, and I'm here today because of that. My grandfather only told that story one time I ever heard him tell that story. And he didn't tell it for recognition, he didn't tell it for any kind of honor. He was like most veterans. They don't seek our recognition most days, and they don't seek to be honored by that. They didn't do it for those reasons, and my grandfather, with pride in his voice, talked about that day, and he never regretted the sacrifices he made for our country, because he wasn't doing it for him, he was doing it for us, like the rest of these veterans here. That's their gratitude and their thankfulness that we should be showing them, is the gratitude of what they did for us. What they have sacrificed to make this the greatest nation in the world. It would not be possible without them. And I want to finish today on the words of my grandfather, who said, America will be the land of the free as long as it remains the home of the brave. Thank you so much for your bravery and your service.
Though it may seem to many that we have limited opportunities to demonstrate it in daily life, our respect, appreciation, and reverence for you, our veterans, never falters. We constantly feel the effects of your courage, selflessness, and your response to our nation's call to duty. As Abraham Lincoln said in his Gettysburg Address, it is for us the living to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall now have died in vain. These thanks have been in order for centuries, and though we may be echoing the words of presidents, governors, and students past, our recognition is as genuine and earnest as theirs. Veterans, you have done your duty that so many are unwilling or unable to do. For this, we are eternally grateful. You have fought for a nation you never fully knew and millions of people you've never met. For this, you are the most esteemed, beloved members of our community. You have provided a service that so many take for granted. You are some of the most compassionate, selfless individuals that many of us will ever have the pleasure and honor to know. You define our nation as the home of the brave. This morning has been filled with thanks, but please bear with me as I say it one final time. Thank you, and welcome home.